Welcome to Money Justice Inside the Courtroom with Tim Felice.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of Money Justice Inside the Courtroom with Timothy Felice. I am your host, Mike Leon. Tim here is the founder of Felice Trial Attorneys. It's a Florida-based personal injury firm known for taking on serious and catastrophic cases in the courtroom. Tim's got more than 15 years of trial experience doing this, and he's dedicated to securing full justice for those that have been harmed by negligence. Today, we're going to be talking about what happens after the jury goes home because, winning a verdict doesn't mean you've been paid. I think a lot of people, that's a common mistake that a lot of people make. Tim, it's good to see you. Most people, I'm sure, out there think that the hardest part of the case ends when the verdict is read. Why isn't that always true?
Well, first, thanks, Mike, for having me on again. It's funny you say that because you're right. The hardest part of the case is over for me when it comes to physically doing the trial and all the prep that comes into it. But just because the verdict gets read doesn't mean it's ever going to get paid. So many things go into it. You have a verdict, and then you have set-offs where the insurance carriers can come in and say, well, hey, wait a minute. Based on this, you have to lower it here. You were given $1 million for your medical bills, but your health insurance only paid $500,000. So now we're going to reduce your $1 million award down to $500,000. So these are just the basic things that happen right after. But there's post-trial motions. The defense tries to get what's called a judgment notwithstanding a verdict, or they try to get a new trial. They say that for whatever it is, there was error during the course of trial, so now they want a new one. They do everything they can to avoid that verdict being turned into a judgment, because that's the next thing you have to. Just because you get a verdict doesn't mean anything. You have to turn that verdict into a final judgment against that defendant, and hopefully add his insurance carrier to the verdict or to the judgment as well.
Yeah. Tim, what other challenges come up after a client wins, especially when it's time to collect the money? Like what are some other big challenges that come up?
All right. So I guess the biggest challenge, based on your question, I'm assuming after we win and it's actually collectible. So let's say we go to a verdict, we get the verdict, and we get the judgment entered, and now it's time to collect. Well, one of the biggest limiting factors is, well, how much insurance is available? Let's say your verdict is for $10 million, and there's $1 million in insurance. Well, you can collect the $1 million from the insurance carrier, but who's left paying the $9 million? The defendant. So then it's a matter of hoping that defendant has assets sufficient to pay whatever that final judgment is. And that is very difficult, especially in Florida, because Florida has a lot of protections for debtors. So getting a judgment and getting a judgment paid are two completely different things. But one of the biggest challenges is that when you were reasonable with the insurance carrier, say in the beginning during the claims process, where the damages are clearly more than whatever the insurance policy is, and the plaintiff has provided all of that proper information to the insurance carrier, and the insurance carrier says, well, we have $1 million in coverage. You say it's worth $10 million. We disagree. We'll give you $100,000. Well, that's a problem for the defendant's insurance carrier. You see, if you get a verdict and a judgment in excess of the insurance policy limits, and you can provide, or you have evidence that the insurance carrier had sufficient evidence or information that a reasonable adjuster would have concluded that the value of the claim exceeds the policy, so the defendant is exposed to having a bigger judgment, then is a possibility you can go after the insurance carrier for what's called bad faith. The carrier putting their interest in saving money on a claim over what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to protect the defendant. They're insured, and they don't do it. That starts in a completely separate lawsuit that can take years and years and years to finish.
Tim, let me ask you then, because let's say a company is refusing to pay. You mentioned some legal tools there, but What legal tools do you use to enforce the judgment, make sure your client gets actually compensated?
Thankfully, we've actually never had to do post judgment enforcement outside of filing a bad faith claim. Every verdict we've gotten that was within an insurance policy limit, they've paid.
Tim, then let me ask you, are there certain types of cases, for example, maybe like corporate defendants or large verdicts, where you've seen in your experience the collection does become especially complicated?
Well, collection when it comes to bad faith cases is the biggest issue. So, I mean, if you've got a corporate defendant and you get a verdict against them that's upheld on appeal, you're likely going to have that paid, assuming it's a corporation that's still viable. If a corporation is in bankruptcy, then you don't get paid, then it's gone. But the large verdicts are the most difficult to actually have paid because the insurance, the more you get, the more they fight, and they will appeal everything they can. They will stretch it out as long as they possibly can. Even if they know or really think that they're never going to win the appeal, they'll appeal because that will take a year, maybe 2 years, depending on what happens. And they know that during the course of time, it's difficult for someone, right, who may not be working, who's got these injuries that need money to survive. And it's another pressure point that they use to try to pay less than what the verdict is. Say there's a $10 million verdict, they'll come in and try to get you to resolve it for half that to avoid an appeal. They would rather extend it as long as possible. Because remember something, insurance carriers make a lot of money on their money. They invest all of that money. At any given time, they may owe billions of dollars to injured people, but they're not paying it out. And why aren't they paying it out? Well, and why did they delay? Why do they defend? Why do they deny? You heard the triple Ds.
Right.
They do it because of interest. Think about this. If you've got a case that where someone has got $10 million in injuries and the carrier knows they're going to have to pay $10 million at some point in time, why would they pay that now? A month, a year, whatever, after a crash. When they know if you litigate, they could force you to trial, they can force you to an appeal, they can hold on to that money for years. And during that whole time, they're investing, they're earning interest on whatever money they make, right? Let's say that they average 10% per year. I know they average a lot more, but on $10 million, that's $1 million a year, right? Let's say that they can push that settlement off for 6 years. That means that during the 6 years that they held on to $10 million, they made $1 million a year. So they made $6 million on their money, really the injured person's money. So when they settle that case 6 years later for $10 million, it actually only cost the insurance carrier $4 million because they made so much money on their interest withholding payment that they rightfully should have paid. And it happens all the time. I tried a case that was crashed was 9 years ago, earlier in the year. We're trying another case in December 1st, where the crash was in 2017. It takes a long time to get through all the processes. And of course, COVID didn't help us.
Right. So, Tim, then the follow up is, how do you manage a client's expectation, especially in that waiting period between verdict and payment? Like, what do you tell them throughout the entire process?
We just be honest with them. We're honest with them from the beginning. We don't tell them what their case is worth. We don't tell them what they're going to get. We explain the process. And part of that explanation is always, if we go to trial and we win, it doesn't mean that they're going to get paid right away. So we try to manage their expectations throughout everything, throughout the entire pre-suit process and the litigation and ultimately the trial process, so that hopefully they understand and they recognize it afterwards, so it doesn't come as a shock. Because I have had that before where I've hopped into cases to try them, and the lawyer that brought us in had never explained to the client that, if you get a verdict on Friday, they don't just automatically pay you. There are things that occur. So we find that to be a little more challenging, but it's a matter of just being honest with a client and making sure that they understand it's not a quick process. It is going to take time.
Tim, in the previous episodes, we've talked about the importance of having a lawyer that will go to trial. What is your reputation, your role? What role does your reputation, excuse me, as a trial lawyer play when you're negotiating these post-verdict settlements and appeals?
Well, so it's interesting. When it comes to appeals, we don't do that. I'm smart enough. I hire one of the best appellate lawyers in the state of Florida. He's a dear friend. His name's Andrew Harris at Harris Appeals. So when it comes to the appeals, the insurance carriers know that we bring in the best. So I don't ever have to worry about dealing with that. That's Andrew's responsibility, and he handles all of the work for the firm. When it comes to post-verdict settlements, doesn't happen very often for us. I typically want the verdict. I can't think of a verdict that we've gotten in the recent past where we didn't collect the full amount, where we had to settle for some lesser amount. We have one huge case on appeal right now, which that one we haven't discussed anything when it comes to post-verdict settlements. But I can tell you, post-verdict settlements, for people that are going to do them, it's great, right? Because you have a jury determination that tells you what the value is. Because right up until that time, it's all what we think, right? It's how we evaluate the case. It's what I think is going to happen. It's what the defense lawyer thinks is going to happen, what the carriers think. And everybody has a number in their mind, but no one knows exactly what that is. And it could be a zero. It could be hundreds of millions of dollars or something anywhere in between. So when you're talking settlement in pre-suit and then during litigation, even during trial, you don't have a set value. So you're still shooting for what you believe the fair value is. But obviously, people have disagreements, right? Insurance carriers think the cases are worth far less. Hopefully, the plaintiff's trial lawyers think the cases are worth far more. And that's what the jury comes in and gives us that number. So once you have that final number, then you can go back to them and say, hey, listen, we told you so. Or maybe they can do it to you. But it's much easier to try to resolve something when you know, hey, this is what the number is. And as the prevailing party, the plaintiff is in the driver's seat for that because we hold the judgment. Right up until an appeal takes it away, that judgment is enforceable. And as long as that appeal is denied, the carrier doesn't have much bargaining power. So post-verdict settlements, when they occur, are usually much more favorable to the plaintiff than pre-suit settlements, litigation settlements, or even mid-trial settlements.
Tim, as we wrap on this episode, someone's listening to this right now. They think the case is over. What should they know? What's a piece of advice you would leave with them to know about the steps that come next after the verdict's announced?
All right. So the normal steps would be a verdict is entered, and then you have to get a final judgment, turning whatever that final verdict is into a judgment. That can be done the same day, or sometimes it can take weeks, even months, if you're fighting over what that number may be. In addition to that, there's going to be challenges from the defense to try to take the verdict away using different motion practice. That's going to take anywhere from a couple of weeks to maybe a couple of months, depending on when that can be heard by the judge. And then after the final judgment is entered, then there's a time period where the defendant has the ability to file a notice of appeal. They will do that. And then that starts the appellate process where they have to file their appellate briefing. The plaintiff would have to do it. That process can take years. And in addition to all of this, let's assume that you collect the money, you get a verdict, you get a judgment, and the judgment's being collected. Now you have to go back and deal with all the lien holders, any medical doctors that have outstanding medical bills, any liens from any health insurance carriers or workers' compensation carriers or disability carriers, other attorneys. there are things that have to be worked out. And even though we try to do them quickly, it takes time. And that's one of the things that anyone who settles a case or is waiting on money should understand, that a lot of work goes into a case after it's settled. Sometimes, depending on how difficult the lien holders are, you can put an extraordinary amount of time just dealing with trying to get the liens resolved. So much so, even we've had to go to hearings and threaten with new lawsuits and trials to get things resolved. So just like anything that has anything to do with the government, claims, lawsuits, trial, litigation, getting paid, it all takes a long time.
It all takes a long time. Tim, thank you for the time and insights on this. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone out there listening to this installment of Money Justice Inside the Courtroom with Timothy Felice. A courtroom win is only half the battle. Getting justice paid in full takes persistence, experience, and a lawyer who won't back down. If you want to learn more, visit injurytrialattorneys.com to connect with Tim and the team. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.